The desert is the last place you'd expect to find a seaport. No coastline, no rivers, nothing but rock and heat. Yet Israel is proposing a project so extreme it sounds impossible, moving enough rock to equal 13 Great Pyramids of Giza and pumping tens of millions of cubic feet of seawater across barren land to carve a canal through the sand. If completed, it could rival the Suez Canal, rewrite global trade routes, and transform the Middle East. But the controversy behind it is even bigger than the engineering. The big proposal. Imagine a massive waterway of an unprecedented scale, slicing through Israel, creating a key crossing between two seas. A project so ambitious that it will challenge the established sea routes that have remained unchanged for decades, and change how countries around the globe conduct trade. This is no geopolitical thriller. Instead, what I am talking about is the proposed Ben Gurion Canal, a mega project of global impact that is steeped in controversy and has the potential to reshape global commerce, shift billions of dollars of revenue among nations, and alter long-respected geopolitical alliances. But before we talk about what makes this project so controversial and impactful, we must first understand what exactly it proposes. The Ben Gurion Canal is named after David Ben Gurion, the founding father of Israel, and what it proposes is quite straightforward. Build a canal that goes through Israel, and according to some proposals, through Palestinian territory that will connect the Red Sea and the Mediterranean Sea. And this won't be some small-scale project built for just moving water. Rather, it will be a massive undertaking that will accommodate the largest tankers and ships that sail the seas. After all, the Ben Gurion Canal is supposed to be a direct rival to the Suez Canal, a well-established crossing that connects the same two seas, only it does so through Egypt. So it has to be better to stand a chance, right? Well, at first glance, that does not seem to be the case. Let me explain. You see, the length of the proposed Ben Gurion Canal is expected to be around 180 miles. But on the other hand, the Suez Canal is only 120 miles long. So why would a ship carrying expensive cargo want to go through a longer canal that will take longer to pass and probably cost more? The answer lies in the other aspects of the Ben Gurion Canal, mainly its capacity and capability. The Suez Canal is mainly a single-lane structure. That means that at a time, the ships going through it can only go in one direction, and that is a major slowdown for the entire operation. Ships have to wait a long while for their turn across. The Ben Gurion Canal seeks to solve that problem. According to the proposed plans, this new canal will be double-laned with a width of around 656 feet in total. That way, two ships can pass each other, traveling in opposite directions. So while the Israeli-made canal may be longer in general, it will probably be way faster overall since ships would have to wait a much shorter duration for their turn. Think of this as a single-lane country road being turned into a modern two-lane highway. And it isn't just that either. The proposed plans one-up the Suez Canal in terms of depth. The Ben Gurion Canal is going to be about 164 feet deep, deeper than the Suez Canal, which only reaches 79 feet. And there is a good reason why that is groundbreaking. The bigger and heavier a ship is, the higher its water displacement is, and the more it will ride below the waterline. And since the Ben Gurion Canal is deeper than the Suez Canal, it will be able to accommodate much heavier and bigger ships. But it isn't just the dimensions of this project either. Geology plays a key role too. The Suez Canal has sandy shores that are prone to shifting and being misshapen by waves. They make for a pretty unstable boundary. But for the Ben Gurion Canal, that won't be a problem. The shores will be made up of rocky walls. It may seem like a small difference, but in the long run, this will reduce the maintenance cost and downtime for the canal. Israel has also planned for this project to include much more than a waterway. Lining the canal will be small cities, hostels, nightclubs, and restaurants, creating economic growth. The canal will be the centerpiece, and these side projects will help generate even more revenue and growth. Add that fact into the mix, and it becomes clear that compared to the Suez Canal, this new project seems like a better alternative in all aspects. But as with all things related to the Middle East, the devil is in the details. There are several good reasons why the Ben Gurion Canal hasn't seen the light of day in decades. And one of those reasons is its controversial history. A blood-soaked history. The thing to remember is that the Ben Gurion Canal isn't a recent idea. This plan has been around for decades. It was first put forth all the way back in the 1960s as a response to the Suez Crisis. In 1956, the Egyptian president nationalized the Suez Canal, basically taking it away from the British and French, who had most of the control over the key crossing point. This move was for obvious reasons, not very popular with those two nations. The British and the French allied themselves with Israel and launched an offensive against Egypt. For a while, it seemed that things would escalate even further. But soon enough, the US, the Soviet Union, and the United Nations put enough pressure on the three attacking countries to make them concede. A sort of truce was reached, but still, the Suez Canal remained closed for Israeli ships for around a year after the events. Due to this sudden acquisition of the only crossing point between the Red Sea and the Mediterranean Sea, people in power began to ask a question. What if they did not need Egypt for their ships to cross this stretch of land? What if they could create an alternative route? And what better ally to do so than Israel, which had the perfect geography to make it happen? And so the idea for the Ben Gurion Canal was born, though what followed was an especially bizarre chapter in the annals of history. That's because once this proposed plan started to be taken seriously, they began coming up with methods on how it could be achieved. And one of the ideas put forth included bombs. Not just any bombs, they wanted to use nuclear bombs. The story is absolutely wild. In 1963, the U.S. Department of Energy wrote a memorandum that went into the details. It involved using 520 underground nuclear bombs to essentially blast an alternative to the Suez Canal in the least amount of time, with much less labor required. The proposal was part of the U.S. government program called Plowshare, aimed at seeking peaceful uses of nuclear bombs. As anyone could have guessed, this proposal was met with heavy pushback. Arab countries were completely against it. Critics pointed out the effects it would have on nature, and there was naturally fear over the long-term radioactive contamination in the region. All those factors essentially killed the proposal in its crib. It was clear that the Ben Gurion Canal couldn't be built this way. So what has happened in the years since? Well, for most of it, the ambitious project has only collected dust. Shelved for good? There are several reasons why the Ben Gurion Canal never came to fruition. For instance, such a project will be heavily damaging to nature in the region. Blasting 520 nuclear bombs to create the plan alone is a deadly enough proposal for the local wildlife and flora. Even conventional canal construction methods don't actually fare much better. If the Ben Gurion Canal is built, it will cut through the Negev Desert and the Araba Valley. These two regions are home to a diverse population of animals and flora that have formed a complex and fragile ecosystem. By introducing a non-discriminatory hurdle, cutting these regions into two will have a devastating effect on the local wildlife, not to mention the huge number of archaeological and historic sites that lie discovered or undiscovered in the region, which would be destroyed if the canal is built. And then there is the problem with connecting the Red Sea and the Mediterranean Sea itself. If a canal like this one is built that causes the water from these two seas to mix, it won't be any good. Both seas have different temperatures and levels of salinity. If they mix due to water discharge from the canal, it will be very harmful for the local marine life. This is especially true for the Red Sea, as it holds one of the most unique ecosystems in the world, and it also happens to be a natural wonder. Connecting the two seas will also inevitably lead to the spread of invasive species, which again can be catastrophic for marine life. These impacts on nature have been a major reason why the question of building the Ben Gurion Canal hasn't been raised since it was shelved. But that certainly is not the sole reason either. There is also the cost of the project to take into account. Throughout the years, one thing has been clear. Building the Ben Gurion Canal will be a huge undertaking financially. We are talking billions of dollars, even $100 billion according to some estimates. That isn't the kind of money even the biggest economies in the world can easily fund. And that cost isn't even justified by what Israel will be gaining by going through with this mega project. Let me explain. Israel has long since stopped importing oil from the Middle East. It gets its oil from Venezuela, which arrives from the Atlantic Ocean and the Mediterranean Sea. and this oil comes cheaper than the one from the Middle East. So, Israel has no urgent need to build the Ben Gurion Canal since its most important import isn't even coming from the Middle East. Lastly, we have the geopolitical reason why this canal was never built. The Arab nations are strongly against the idea, and this opposition could quickly turn into security threats. So to prevent that, it is in Israel's best interest not to bring up the topic of building the Ben Gurion Canal. Now, aside from all that, there is one more very important reason why it hasn't been built yet, and that reason involves the actual paving of the proposed canal that takes some very controversial turns. From where and to where? Geography matters enormously in this mega project, especially when it comes to what route the Ben Gurion Canal will take if it were to be built. While there are multiple proposed routes, the starting point remains the same. The canal, if built, will begin at the Gulf of Aqaba, which is located at the northern tip of the Red Sea. From here it would follow the regional route which crosses the Jordanian border, and then flow through the Araba Valley. From there it would travel a lengthy stretch, weaving through the Negev Mountains and the Jordanian highlands. From there it would veer west towards the Dead Sea Basin. It will cross a valley in the Negev mountain range before turning north towards its most controversial section. After this point, things get quite politically explosive. One proposed route will have the canal pass close to Gaza. Other variations have it going further north than that. And according to some, the route will cut right through Gaza. And since Gaza is not Israeli territory, but rather belongs to Palestine, these proposals have caused quite an uproar in the past, just as they are doing today. The canal cannot pass through Gaza, since that would mean displacing thousands, maybe millions of people. And if it passes too close to Gaza, that may end up carrying the same risk, since the borders between Palestine and Israel are as of yet under contention, to put it mildly. Some experts have put forth claims that Israel has been motivated to control Gaza so strongly in the past, mainly so it can build this canal through the territory, passing it straight through, taking more land in the process and displacing more Palestinians. In that case, it would be a huge human rights violation. Meanwhile, others say that if the canal is built, it will respect the Palestinian boundaries. Now, whether or not that is true is yet to be seen. The exact route isn't something that has been officially confirmed. It isn't even clear if Israel is even considering building the Ben Gurion Canal in the first place. But hypothetically, if it is built, what would it mean for the world? The answer can only be found by following the money. While Israel has no urgent need to build the Ben Gurion Canal, it certainly does have a lot to gain by building it, at least in the financial sense. Such a crossing point could bring in an absurd amount of money into the economy. And we don't have to look far for an example. The Suez Canal handles about 12% of the global maritime trade. That makes it a critical choke point in global trade. And if you own that kind of choke point, you can make a lot of money off of it. Egypt has done just that. In 2023, the nation made $9.4 billion from the Suez Canal alone. This thing has been a lifeline for Egypt for decades at this point, propping up its economy even when other revenue streams for the nation have struggled. No matter what happens, the trade always goes on. Now just imagine if a good chunk of that 12% of global maritime trade traffic switches over to an Israeli canal. And they probably will, since there will be fewer waiting times, faster clearance, and better reliability. What would happen then? According to experts, Israel could be making about $10 billion a year with that. $6 billion of that will be in transit fees alone. That's a lot of money that could boost Israel's economy. And Israel may not even have to wait that long to see a return on its investment. You see, simply building the canal would give the economy a huge boost. It will create jobs, attract investors, and bring in businesses from outside. The development spurred from this momentum could leave lasting benefits that keep giving back for decades. Keep in mind, it won't just be the canal. They would also be building ports, logistics centers, maintenance facilities, hotels, and fuel depots catering to the ships passing through. Such an economic boost can be quite beneficial for any establishment. But then again, for Israel, the Ben Gurion Canal isn't just about revenue. It is a matter of a variety of other benefits as well. More than just revenue. The Ben Gurion Canal is something that has the potential to change Israel's strategic position in the region and on a global scale. Here is how. First of all, the presence of the canal will make Israel in charge of a new yet very important maritime route choke point in the world. That means it can exert pressure globally by restricting and allowing access to countries as it sees fit. Additionally, it will make more countries become reliant upon it, and that will play out to Israel's benefit in the long run. These countries will know that without the Ben Gurion Canal, they will face a loss in terms of their imports and exports. So if Israel is threatened in some way that would compromise the integrity of the canal, more nations will be ready to help out to whatever degree they can to protect their own interests. That will help raise Israel's prominence as a key player in geopolitics both in the region and around the world. This project will also take the figurative bullets out of Egypt's guns, as everyone who hasn't been living under a rock knows that Israel is heavily backed by the U.S. And in the past, the U.S. has been hesitant to throw its full support behind its friend because it fears repercussions in case Egypt stops American-bound ships from crossing the Suez Canal. But if Israel can provide a viable alternative in the form of the Ben Gurion Canal, that wouldn't matter anymore. America will be more liberal in its support for Israel, especially military support, and there is also the matter of energy security. While Israel does import its oil and gas from Western nations, it still somewhat relies on the Middle East for a portion of its oil and energy supply. So in case of a conflict, the energy sector for Israel is not really secure. But by building the canal, Israel can remedy that. It can circumvent key choke points under the control of the Arab nations, such as the Strait of Hormuz. That way, Israel can know its energy sector can keep operating even if the Arab world isn't cooperating. Now, while all these are very good reasons why the Ben Gurion Canal would be beneficial for Israel, it isn't the only player on the big stage that is set to gain something here. This project will have far-reaching consequences on a global scale. A global game of chess. The Ben Gurion Canal isn't just for Israel and Egypt. It touches upon the benefit of every major power. Let's take the U.S. for example. For the U.S., the Ben Gurion Canal will act as a viable alternative to the Suez Canal, making the nation less reliant on just one trading route. Additionally, the Ben Gurion Canal will help the U.S. and Israel reduce the Chinese influence in the region. You see, China has been undertaking massive mega-projects under the umbrella of the Belt and Road Initiative. This has been a pain in the side of the U.S., which doesn't want its rival to gain so much more global influence and power. By helping Israel build the Ben Gurion Canal, America seems to create a counter to China's advances, raising the overall relevance and power of the U.S. in the Asian theater. Aside from the U.S., there are many other countries that will have to reevaluate their stance on Israel if the Ben Gurion Canal is built. This primarily includes China, Russia, Egypt, the Gulf states, and Turkey. Any and all regional and global powers that seek the Ben Gurion Canal for their maritime trade will be forced to look more favorably upon Israel for their own benefits. And how will Palestine be affected? Well, that depends upon a number of factors, chief of which is whether or not Gaza gets steamrolled to build this project. And even if the canal circumvents Palestinian territories, that doesn't mean it will be favorable for the war-torn nation. Many of the countries that speak out in support of Palestine may not end up continuing that support in the long run if their own trade is going to be affected by doing so. That in turn could motivate Israel to operate with even less constraint than it is currently. And if all that does come to pass, it is not like the Israeli canal will be protected enough once it is built. Because, as it stands, the Ben Gurion Canal is going to be faced with some huge challenges beginning from the moment the first bucket of sand is dug to construct it. The human cost. For Palestine, the plans for the Ben Gurion Canal are a major red flag. If this thing is going to be built on Palestinian territory, specifically Gaza, the organizations operating within may take steps to retaliate. The Suez Canal is already under attack most of the time by Houthi rebels, and they have a tough time dealing with it, that much is quite clear. A similar situation could end up being created in Israel. The Israel-Palestine territories are much more divided and politically charged regions than Egypt, so Hamas or any other such organization may target the proposed Ben Gurion Canal, trying to prevent its construction. And if it is unable to achieve a halt in construction, it may try to prevent the canal from operating effectively. Guerrilla warfare is quite effective against such structures. That much has already been proven by the Suez Canal, where, despite Egypt's best efforts, the Suez crossing has had its profits cut in half due to terrorist attacks by the Houthis. For the Ben Gurion Canal, the reality could be even worse, since the region is far more dangerous, and the guerrilla fighters are far more experienced and capable. At the same time, building the canal will also antagonize Egypt and anger the Arab nations further, all of which can create newer enemies that Israel will have to deal with, while also prompting some countries to finance Israel's enemies with weapons. Certainly not a great outlook. And even if you forget the possible attacks for a moment from these groups and just look at the canal itself, the question arises, is it really worth it compared to the human cost of it all? If Israel ends up building the canal through Gaza, a large number of people will be displaced. And how will that look for the world that has its eyes fixed on the Israel-Palestine conflict? Only recently did the Palestinian territories go through one of the worst wars in history, and talks of building a canal right after that, though the region raises eyebrows. Some critics point out that perhaps the two events are linked. They accuse Israel of having razed Gaza down to the ground just to clear the way for this canal. They are calling it a reconstruction as a weapon argument. Those are some serious accusations that will gain credibility if the plans of the Ben Gurion Canal start being discussed by the higher-ups even more. And let's be real. If Israel is only proposing this plan to boost trade in the region, wouldn't it just be easier to expand the Suez Canal instead of creating a whole new waterway? Not to mention the fact that alternative sea routes already exist that circumvent the Suez Canal. For instance, many ships sail around Africa. It's a longer trip for sure, but it is still better than spending $100 billion on a canal. The point being raised here is quite simple. Building the Ben Gurion Canal may be profitable and may speed things along in the long term for global trade, but it still seems somewhat redundant once you take into account both the human and financial costs of building it. Right now, the world can do without another waterway, but what it cannot do without is peace. And that's all for today. Don't forget to hit those like and subscribe buttons. I'll be back with another video. Thank you.